Hey everybody, it's PartyElite, back with some more Total War Warhammer 3, this time taking a look at Ku'Gath, Plaguefather, carrying the banner of Papa Nurgle into the fray. As always, if you're interested in grabbing the game and supporting the channel as you do so, feel free to use the link in the description down below. And also, as always, if you want to avoid spoilers, feel free to use the timestamps down below to skip around as you see fit, especially if you want to avoid the opening cutscenes and campaign map flyover, which is exactly what's about to kick us off.
The gallows tree, dwelling of Ku'Gath, father of plagues. There is no greater brewmaster of phage and pox than he. To describe the squalor of the fetid sewer is impossible. I risked my very flesh to tread it. Ku'Gath thought me but another specimen for his grotesque experiments. Before the rot consumed me, I offered something finer. Belagor has imprisoned the god-bear of Kislev.
Oh, how delightful. If Belagor has struck, there'll be plenty of carrion for me.
Ursun himself lies dying, fatally wounded in the Forge of Souls.
A dying god. The finest corpse from which to brew a plague.
A god pox, mighty Ku'Gath.
A god pox. You tempt me, old man. But I cannot reach the Forge of Souls. The maelstrom prevents us.
I can reach it and guide you to the dying bear.
And why would you do this, little healthy mortal?
For a single drop of Ursun's blood. That is my fate.
Damn it! Blood for you, the body for me. Our goal is to harvest the god-bear's corpse, the perfect specimen, to create the most unholy of plagues, the god pox. I love the murk, but this time I require clarity. Infected you'll be if you do not allow me to see.
Our travels from the gallows tree to the sunken sewers place us much closer to mortal lands. All the better for you to unleash your brews and ensure we are powerful enough to breach the realm of chaos when the time comes. Ogres encroach on our land and squat in Glutport, our access point to the frozen sea. Get rid of them. We must be wary of leaving our eastern flank exposed even as we look south. For hated dwarfs recolonize Karak Dum, a beachhead in the Chaos Wastes they have no intention of losing. And southwards, just across the sea, are tribes of mortals, followers of the dark gods, easy to corrupt and make puppets of, or even vanquish. Food for your plague bearers. But it is through Black Blood Pass where frail Kislev lies supine and ready for infection. You shall bring misery upon its people before defiling their god. I can see you are eager to begin, feculent brewmaster. So let us conquer in Grandfather's name.
The starting situation. Ku'Gath finds himself nestled right in the middle of everything, with fellow demons of Nurgle next door and friendly warriors of chaos to the north. Skarbrand is a stone's throw away, a buffer between you and Nakari, and demons of Tzeentch can be found to your north, with Kairos not being too far away to your east either. Your north is relatively safe for starters, especially if you're forging some alliances, but your first few enemies will be the Ogre Kingdoms and the dwarfs behind them, a potential challenge. The Sunken Sewers acts as a great starting point as the capital of the Cliffs of Death. I think Weeping Creepers are worth building right away, as that casualty replenishment buff will come in handy immediately, and it doesn't hurt to boost corruption for the added growth benefits it'll provide you either. You'll want to upgrade this settlement as quickly as possible. The sooner you do it, the more rewards you'll reap further down the campaign, which is something I'll get into in just a little bit. Your army can be somewhat flimsy against the Ogre Kingdoms and even the dwarfs beyond them, since you lack anti-large or armor-piercing, with the latter only being available through Ku'Gath and your plague drones early on. A Beast of Nurgle can help against the dwarfs with its armor-piercing, but you're pretty out of luck as far as anti-large is concerned for use against ogres. Their Noblars won't cause you any trouble though. And don't underestimate Nurglings. Nurglings are your hammer, your anvil, and everything in between. They can bog enemy units down, they can rear charge, and they can hold enemies in place as you use spells to devastate them. Plague Bearers also have decent survivability, though they're slow as molasses. Everything is. You'll want to pace your expansion as well, especially if using auto-resolve, since the way recruitment and replenishment works is very different for Nurgle. It's not a terrible idea to start your campaign by defeating the opening enemy army, getting your armor-piercing plague-ridden, and then attacking the settlement here right away, followed by recruiting units and using the pestilent growth unholy manifestation to get to full strength as quickly as possible before moving on. It all works a little differently with Nurgle, so let's dive a little deeper into this cesspool. Living buildings. Upgrading your settlements and the buildings within works a little differently with Nurgle, and you'll want to pay close attention to a few factors here since it requires a decent amount of adjustment from the usual. One thing that remains familiar is in how the main settlement building works, a single line that goes straight up in level, unlocking more benefits as it does so. There are a couple of other buildings like this, landmark buildings and defense buildings in particular, but everything else works in a tremendously different way. You'll only ever need to build a building in a building slot once as Nurgle. Barring the rare occasion where you demolish a building, you'll never have to invest more money into a building than that first time you decide to fill the slot with something. That initial construction will take a certain amount of time, and after it's done, you'll gain access to the benefits of the building in question, and it will immediately begin to grow towards its next tier. It takes about 4 turns to go from tier to tier, though the final tier is always 5 turns to reach, and as these tiers are reached, the building is upgraded, giving you access to the benefits associated with the upgraded tier, and then immediately working towards its next tier. Upon reaching the final tier, the building then starts to decay, and after the appropriate number of turns pass, the building returns to its initial state, Tier 1, reverting all your benefits back to square one, potentially hurting your economy, growth rates, the spread of corruption, and literally everything you might be relying on at any given time. You can adjust how quickly buildings upgrade through the appropriate commandments, like Plague God's Greenhouse, speeding up infrastructure building cycles, and you can use plagues with the Pox base or the Violent Spasms symptom to speed up various building cycles, and you can research cyst growths in the first tech group, or any technology that has incubation in the name in order to speed up specific building cycles. This cost-free cycle of upgrade and downgrade is largely to your benefit, and it'll often result in great stockpiles of wealth since you have one less thing to spend money on. But don't get too zealous with your expenses either. You need to remember that from time to time, your economy will collapse in on itself, slowly recovering over time. With this modified approach to buildings, there's a modified approach to how tiers work as well. Next to key levels of each building that work this way, you'll find markers that denote which level the settlement needs to be in order to sustain that building at that particular level or higher. If the settlement isn't at that level, either because you haven't upgraded it yet or because it's a minor settlement and it can never get to that level, then the building will simply go back to stage 1 when it would have become that higher unattainable level. You'll sometimes be able to calculate your turns to get ahead of the cycle. When you build a building, you know you have about 4 turns per stage of construction and evolution. Are you growing at a quick enough rate that you can upgrade your settlement to keep up? Of course, this isn't necessary to do, but if you're trying to pick between settlements to upgrade, it's something you might want to take into consideration. Note that this marker will only show up at the first stage at which a settlement needs to be at a certain level, and it'll only show up if the settlement isn't already at that prerequisite level. Note as well that you should learn to ignore these numbers at the bottom left corner of each building at each level. They denote the tier of the building itself, but have no actionable association with the tier of the settlement. Focus instead on these markers. One more thing that is new with this approach to building is unit recruitment. So let's talk a bit about sustaining your armies. The military aspect of playing as Nurgle is, just like settlement management, quite different. It has some familiar elements to older factions from prior games, but when all the pieces come together, it feels like something completely new and, ironically, fresh. Nurgle's armies recruit from a global recruitment pool at all times, and newly recruited units are added to the army the second you click the recruit button. They are, however, recruited at reduced health, and they need to replenish to full health over the first few turns, unless you're feeling risky. You can absolutely recruit units and move immediately afterward, getting into battle and using those newly recruited units right away, if need be, and heck, you can even recruit units right after as well to make up for anything you lost, but just keep an eye on unit health, and remember that new additions are neither free nor at full strength when they first arrive. And on top of that, they're not always available either. The recruitment pool needs to fill up over time, and the larger your realm, the faster it'll fill up. Every stage of almost every building adds units to the recruitment pool. When selecting a building, pay close attention not just to the unit card next to the building icon, but to the number of said unit you'll get access to at that stage. As a building is first finished being built, and then as it enters each new stage of its life cycle, that number of said unit is added to your recruitment pool. So, about every 4 or so turns, almost every building adds something to the recruitment pool. Nurglings, as you can see, are going to be very commonly available, but higher tier troops aren't rare in the mid-game or anything, because the cost to get to that building tier is relatively minimal, just a matter of time. Apart from the things completely under your control, random events will sometimes help fill up the recruitment pool as well. There is a maximum limit to each unit you can hold in the recruitment pool, as shown here, so make sure to keep emptying this pool from time to time, either by raising new armies to hold them in, or by merging units in your active armies to make room for fresh recruits. Losing entire units is expensive as Nurgle, especially if it happens when your recruitment pool is empty. You'll want to merge units from time to time, because where 2 weak units might die, one merged, stronger unit might survive, and you'll want to invest in replenishment as well. Get to Unholy Resilience quickly, seeking other replenishment boosts along the way, and if you ever find yourself badly hurt, use your Pestilent Growth Unholy Manifestation to significantly boost replenishment. It has a 15-turn cooldown though, so it's no get-out-of-jail-free card by any stretch of the imagination. Try to take advantage of any replenishment in battles to minimize how much you need to rely on in the campaign map, and spend time garrisoned in cities to get up to full health when you can't just merge units and recruit replacements. Then again, even if recruiting replacements, you'll want to sit tight to get them to full strength more often than not. Be careful with overextending your recruitment pool as well. You don't want to give one army all the good units, leaving another without options if they get badly hurt. Though, even weakened armies destined for doom have a purpose. Pushing plagues. From spreading plagues using weak armies and dirty tricks, to using cultists that would die for the job, what would a Nurgle-themed faction be without pestilence and plague? A powerful tool in your arsenal, plagues can be used to hit enemy armies, cities, and provinces with all kinds of debuffs, while your own armies and faction as a whole stand to benefit. Nurgle's Visitation is a great way to cause a sudden surge of plagues, though it's not available until there's plenty of Nurgle corruption around the world, and it doesn't give you control over the plagues that start spreading. For that, you'll need to use the Plague Cauldron. Select a target-friendly army or settlement, and you can open the cauldron up to see all your options. Many of them are locked to start, but all you need is a base plague to get a start. All plagues spread Nurgle corruption wherever they're active, and almost all will help add to the infection resource you need to start plagues in the first place. Rot adds Nurglings to the recruitment pool on spreading instead, and almost all of the base plagues have negative effects on infected enemy cities or armies. Keep in mind that armies and cities need to be actively infected with the plague in order for these effects to apply. An army can't just stand in a province or rest in a city that has the plague. The army itself needs to be infected, and the same goes the other way around too. Ague is a great way to slow down enemies that are trying to escape your grasp, and bubbos, I never know how to say this one, are great for softening up enemy settlements during a siege. Most of the symptoms apply negative effects to a target enemy army or settlement under siege or during an assault, but some focus on giving your own armies and settlements buffs instead. Bleeding ears, violent spasms, necrotizing flesh, mucus runs, and constant vomiting are all helpful in their own ways, and all but sores in the bottom row are helpful for your own faction rather than detrimental to another. As you can see though, the symptoms in this bottom row rely on technology to unlock, and all other symptoms require certain milestones to be met in order to unlock them. Each of the first 3 rows asks for 5, 25, or 50 successful times that you've spread the base plague named at the top of that column, so make sure you're spreading the love across your base plagues if you're eyeing some of the higher level symptoms. At the bottom, meanwhile, are recipes to particularly powerful plagues. These require specific bases and symptoms to be unlocked first and add extra benefits to the plague, primarily extending the duration of the plague and increasing its chance of spreading while adding to Nurgle corruption. This is common across the board, but the effect listed at the bottom is different between them. Only the Grim Shakes hurts enemy armies, and all others benefit your own armies and settlements. But enough talk about recipes, let's actually get to cooking. In order to start a plague, you need a target. Picking your own settlement or army makes sense for most plagues, and it's the cheapest way to get a start. Your other option is to summon a plague cultist carrying the selected plague next to your selected target army or settlement, and then sending said cultist out to target an enemy army or settlement with a 100% chance of success of starting the plague at said target. Either option costs infections, and the more symptoms you add to the recipe, the more expensive it gets, and while infections are easy enough to come by, you'll want to keep an eye on them early on to make sure they're not being wasted. Looting and sacking settlements provides infections, but honestly, defeating an army will give you so many more after a victory, should you choose to collect, that you really don't need to feel the pressure of looting or sacking unless you want to for some other reason. And we haven't even started talking about cults, another great source of infections. But once a plague actually starts, its chances of spreading are based on the symptoms of the plague, any technology you've researched to increase it, and any skills like Ku'Gath's Rotting Ways that helps all armies increase their chance of spreading a plague. It's a bit of a dice roll, but a surefire way of spreading plague is through battle, specifically through losing battles. When an infected army and a healthy army do battle, if the healthy army wins, it gets infected with the plague that the infected army was carrying. The infected army doesn't need to be destroyed, it just needs to be defeated. You don't have to use a weak army for this purpose, but sending a lone infected warrior out to lose against a threatening enemy army and its reinforcements is a good way to hit them with attrition from ague, for example, but then roll in with your actual army to finish the job. The other option is to actually engage in battle with your stronger army and then immediately withdraw. Yes, these both count as losses technically, but the plague will have spread, which really means you've won. This is an especially great way to spread the plague from your army to a weak enemy army that'll be retreating on the campaign map. It might go to an enemy settlement and spread the plague there, it might get attacked by another healthy army and spread the plague there. It won't just attack your army only for you to crush it right away though, and that's really beneficial. Either way, either method requires at least one of the two armies to be infected, so yes, you can absolutely attack and defeat an infected enemy army to reinfect your own army and keep the plague going. Each infection only lasts a handful of turns after all, even when upgraded through tech and symptoms. And just as a note, neither army has to be a Nurgle army either. One just has to be infected. So feel free to use plague cultists to infect enemy armies that are about to get crushed in battle, and enjoy as the plague spreads to the victorious army, racking up your spread count while spreading the love. On the topic of spreading things though, creeping corruption. Corruption is the bedrock of chaos-worshipping society, and Nurgle is no different. Weeping creepers are a great way to generate additional corruption, and at higher levels, the building grows to spread corruption in adjacent provinces too. Characters can spread corruption with the right skills, and commandments can help with the task too, while certain technology, like plague infection can help boost the spread of Nurgle corruption as well. Whatever your method may be, it's definitely something you should consider prioritizing, as higher Nurgle corruption levels help maintain control over a province and buff growth as well, something that'll help you get to those higher tier units faster. Higher levels of god-specific corruption also cause attrition to non-chaos armies, and it helps fight the spread of other forms of corruption too. As we discussed with the Khorne video, you want to get a head start with spreading corruption, as those same negative modifiers apply to you if you're late to the party. A province that is already highly corrupt in favor of another god, for example, will slow the spread of your own corruption, if not eliminate it completely. And multiple types of corruption having high levels will stack those negative modifiers, potentially making it impossible to overcome until you've conquered the province anyway. Spreading corruption can really help soften a province up for conquest, making it easier to defeat the armies within due to attrition, and making it easy to maintain control afterwards. Spreading corruption can also help through cults. Cults form when corruption of a specific type gets particularly high in a province, and they can open up a few options for you as the player. They primarily focus on increasing the rate of infection gain, but they can also be used to spread a random plague to the host city at the cost of destroying the cult. Don't underestimate this infection gain rate though. It might seem like nothing, but 100 infections is all it takes to get a new base plague cultist, and becomes a crucial launchpad for your biowarfare operations. The warm embrace of Nurgle can be spread in many ways, and through his message of peace, love, and harmony, you can have a great time uniting the world under one diseased banner as you tackle the main quest. At times, you'll want to slow your roll and ensure you have access to units to recruit, and then have them get to full strength, but once you get rolling, the plagues, corruption, and the brutal business of battle makes for a good bit of fun. Just a reminder that you can grab the game at the link in the description down below if you like what you see and you want to support the channel as you buy, and if you have any thoughts or questions of your own, feel free to drop them in the comments down below, and I'll try to get to them as soon as possible. For more Total War and strategy gaming reviews, previews, let's plays, guides, and more, don't hesitate to subscribe to the channel, and as always, a massive thanks goes out to all of the channel members and patrons who've been supporting the channel on a monthly basis. Y'all keep us alive and running smoothly, and of course, a big ol' thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.